The Walking Dead was the first piece of zombie media that I ever consumed. I started watching it in high school, and through thick and thin, I have been there every day since. I've watched every last episode that's come out, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There have been days where I loved it, where I thought it was peak fiction, where I thought nothing could ever get better than this, and there were other days where I like, well, that was pretty lame, you know, I don't want to watch that one again. But regardless, it holds a very special place in my heart, and nothing will ever replace what The Walking Dead has been for me. Except 9 months ago, it did come to an end, and now I do have to find a replacement, and that's exactly what I've been doing. I've been watching non-stop movies and shows with Mak, and we're gonna tell you about them right now. For those of you who don't know, get in the loop, idiots. This is Mak, my partner.
Hello.
So yeah, we've been watching a bunch of zombie movies and shows, and we came up with a fun little ranking system to put them by. But before we tell you what it is, we should let you know, this is just our opinion, and also at the end of the day, I don't really believe in number system ratings, but they're also fun. So we have a number systems ratings for these. It's a review!
Our rubric is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10. We're going to go over character depth, zombie lore, pacing, antagonists, tension, and unpredictability.
The fun thing about The Walking Dead is throughout its whole lifespan, it has been a 1 to a 10 in every single one of these categories at some point in the very, very long show. The last season alone has in my opinion, a 10 out of 10 antagonist and a really freaking boring one that I don't... Also, everything is spoiler free until it's suddenly not. We will give you a warning before we do spoilers with a timestamp to go to the not spoiler part. Let's talk about World War Z. World War Z is a really fun one, and it's also a really safe one. I described it as the perfect party zombie movie. It was also the first fast zombie movie I ever watched, so I got the proper ooh scary fast zombies experience out of it.
It was a good one. It was definitely not the first fast zombie movie I watched. I watched it these last 4 months for the first time. I had watched probably 4 or 5 fast zombie things prior to this. I don't doubt that it was revolutionary for the time period it came out. It was fine for me. As far as character depth goes, the main character was very American. Very Gerard Butler-esque trope, if you've seen any of the Is Fallen movies, Angel is Fallen, White House is Fallen. It's literally the exact same character, just in a new genre. This white guy, he's got good connections in the government, and he loves his family a lot. And
He loves his family.
That's the first 10 minutes. 5 out of 10.
I have a bone to pick with you here.
Okay.
Because I gave it a 6 out of 10. He's a perfectly fine character. I find him to be likable. Maybe it's because I'm white, though.
He was just a hashtag relatable character to you.
I don't have good connections to the government.
Not yet.
I'm not fighting for my family.
The point is, he's supposed to be a character you can idolize. You can look at him and go, wow. Let me have a little fantasy about my white picket fence, 2.5 children per family.
2.5?
That's the national average. I would like to preface this by saying I am a World War Z book reader. I read the book and I really, really enjoyed it.
Nerd.
I had expectations for the main character because there wasn't a main character in the book.
I just liked the main guy. I can't say that, honestly, he really didn't have too much depth. There's not much he has to confront emotionally or morally or anything. He's just doing his thing. I thought the side characters were more interesting, the random ones that pop up throughout the movie. You don't get the whole backstory for anyone or anything crazy, but nothing to dislike. 6 out of 10. So zombie lore. I liked the zombies. They're fast little guys. You got fast turn times, so that's an element of scary. If someone gets bit, they're done. They have consistent rules without being too convoluted. They get talked about, but not in a way that bores you. The most interesting part was they had this mystery element where throughout the movie there are characters that they just completely avoid, you'll see a stampede of zombies going just right around one individual. That leads to a pretty interesting and satisfying ending, which I will not be saying here because this is the spoiler-free section.
I think everything that needs to be said about zombies as far as how the characters interact with them is established very early on in the movies, and I do respect that a lot. Unpredictability is a fun factor as well, and we're gonna go over that too. But when you know what's going to happen as far as a character's immediate interactions with a zombie, that's always fun to have. Still 6 out of 10 though for spoiler reasons.
If you think 6 is low, it's because it's within the context of all these other movies. They're good zombies.
They're good zombies. zombies. They do their job.
That's why it's higher than 5.
For pacing, fast zombies, fast movie, you gotta love it. The initial outbreak scene is as fast as you'd want an outbreak scene to be. You gotta love the adrenaline rush of seeing people thrust into a situation that definitely would not be handled as well for anyone else.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it slowed down a little at the end, just a little too slow. Anytime it slows down before that, it's very briefly, it's to go over something important. It's a moment that you'd want it to slow down at. It doesn't feel forced or unnatural. I think I gave pacing an 8 out of 10 for this one.
I gave pacing an 8 out of 10 as well. As far as the slowed down portions of the movies went, especially the ending, I actually liked how much the ending slowed down because you knew that something was going to happen, and so the fear of when it would pick back up again was enough to keep you on edge. There is no antagonist.
There is not an antagonist in this movie.
The government
there is just
the antagonist.
Government and zombies, but it's pretty much just a zombie problem. But speaking of the thing you were saying before, tension. Tensions were high, tensions were hot and horny.
You cannot say that.
I am declaring this the beginning of the spoilers section. If you don't want spoilers for World War Z, here's a timestamp. You can go there for no spoilers. Okay, talk about the tension.
There was no tension. Outside the end of the movie, like I said previously, there wasn't a whole lot. If you have watched any of the Gerard Butler #IsFallen movies, you knew everyone was gonna be fine. You knew the main character was gonna be fine. You knew his family was going to be fine. Any of the tension came from me being scared that the side characters with more than one line were going to die, because I actually liked them a lot more than the main character. 5 out of 10 on tension.
In hindsight, you know, after watching the movie, it makes sense that everyone was fine, but I didn't know that when I started. I was just like, this is a zombie movie. Anyone can go at any time. When that girl gets bit in the arm, I was like, ooh, and then he cuts her arm off, and I was like, whew, I was scared. The doctor guy did die. I liked it. I thought it was interesting, because he had this character with this interesting concept. You're like, ooh, this is like a smart young dude. This is gonna be the guy that saves the world. And then he gets scared, falls, and kills himself. It's like, damn.
It was a little funny. It was funny because I saw it I read it in the book already. If I saw it just off the bat, I would have been very upset.
It was interesting, because I was scared for him because of the zombies, and then he just went out in a way I couldn't have guessed. Which leads me, sorry, tension was an 8 out of 10 for me. But this leads me to unpredictability, which I gave a 9 out of 10 because I didn't know what was gonna happen, especially for the ending. They find a cure, but it's not like exactly a cure, it's like a camouflage. The whole sequence that plays out from that point on is, again, really tense, and something I wasn't sure how it was gonna end. I almost thought he was gonna get bit, sacrifice himself to save the world type beat. You knew that wasn't gonna happen, but I was scared. 4
out of 10 unpredictability. I knew exactly what was going to happen.
Mac had this down. Mac could have written this movie.
I didn't know what was gonna happen to the main character, except I knew he was gonna live. But you injected a disease into you, you're fine. How was that one? World War Z.
I'd recommend it. I think it's fun.
It does its job as a fun zombie movie.
Fun zombie movie.
Go watch the fun
zombie movie.
Revolutionary? Original even? It's not your movie.
I
liked it. I feel like I'm being overcritical. It was fun. It was good.
There's not a lot to chew on with it. It's just fun.
Speaking of non-white main characters, we're gonna move straight into Train to Busan. Train to Busan is a super renowned Korean zombie movie. It, I believe, won #1 zombie movie of the year upon its year of release, which was back in 2015, I wanna say. I've watched it over 20 times probably. Every time I recommend it, I go, I'll watch it with you because I love to watch people cry.
I cried a lot.
This movie gets bonus points for making Danny cry a lot.
This ended up being one of my absolute favorites on this whole list. I've now watched it twice and I cried just as much the second time, if not even more. Characters were phenomenal. What you got is a train full of people and also zombies. And these characters are characters that you're gonna care about very soon, very quickly, very fast. And without any nonsense flashbacks or overly like detrimental exposition, it just happens, it plays out very naturally. No one ever does anything that makes you go, oh, but why would they do that? That's so stupid, which is a very common thing in zombie media, is people just being stupid to be stupid. This is actually one of the first movies where like you're impressed by, oh my gosh, oh thank God, they're like being smart in the zombie apocalypse. I gave character depth a whopping 9.5 out of 10. Wow, beautiful characters.
Anything you felt towards the characters, they wanted you to feel that specific emotion towards the characters. But it never felt like they were caricatures. They always felt like really real people. I believe it's like an hour and 45-minute time frame. You grow attached to these characters or you immediately hate them, and it's just very nice to have. You know, you go in and you are so sure that that emotion is gonna stick, and it does. 9.5 as well.
It's hard to speedrun character depth so effectively without being like corny or overbearing, and I think they nailed it.
So for zombie lore, this was my first fast zombie movie. I remember watching this for the first time and shaking. I was so scared of these zombies. I was also like 14, but the point was very scary. They did their job as fast zombies. They bit you and then you turned really fast. If World War Z was my first zombie movie, I'd probably give the same sentiment. But, you know, they did their job.
I would argue that these are scarier ones, though, because of the design and, like, the way they... You want to tell them about the, like, behind-the-scenes of some of these guys?
Oh my goodness. I watched the behind-the-scenes after I finished the movie because I was so sad. These zombies, the extras in this movie, a majority of them are professional gymnasts or professional dancers, and you can definitely see it in the way that they move. There's one zombie that breaks their arm from a fall about halfway through the movie, and they, like, throw their arm over their back, and it's very gross looking. Come to find out, that guy can just do that.
It's just practical effects, baby.
That, which is really gross. Yeah, they are nastier for sure now thinking about it. They're bloodier, they're gorier, the CGI, arguably a little corny. Not enough to take you out of the movie though. I give it a 5 out of 10. I still like these zombies.
They are scary, they are gross, they're cool looking. I like when they pile against doors and then fall out of them. You don't learn a ton about like the origin, but it is like implied. It's a little guessing mystery for you. They don't shove the lore in your face because that is not the focal point of this movie. Unlike World War Z, he's a military guy trying to stop this thing, right? These are just some guys on a train trying to live. Without giving away too much, there's just a lot of interesting little moments. 6.5 out of 10. They look cool, I like them. Pacing. 10 out of 10. There was never a dull moment in this whole movie, even like in like the beginning. Zombie deer. You're like, woo. One of my main pet peeves in specifically zombie media, really any apocalypse media, but it happens the most in zombie stuff, is bickering scenes where the characters are like fighting about what should we do next, or what about the morality of this and that. Fighting about dumb stuff that is annoying and goes on for too long. I hate it so much, and I'm gonna rant about it later because we watched a lot of zombie things. And in this movie, it's paced so well that the bickering scenes are good, okay? It's speed run, there's more stuff going on while they're fighting about nonsense. I've watched this movie twice and it didn't bother me the second time either. That's how you know it was good. It was very... It's a good movie.
It's a very good movie. I also gave it a 10 out of 10. Like I said, first fast zombie movie. I was stressed beyond belief. Fast zombies, fast movie. Everything was happening so fast all the time. I did not have time to grieve for any character deaths, especially. I was sad after every character death. All of the dialogue felt necessary. All of it was just important to characters, if not important to their survival. You gotta love it. Gotta love the movie.
We're gonna talk about the antagonist, which also means we're gonna talk about spoilers. So you're in spoiler territory now. This is the spoiler zone. Skip to the timestamp to get out of the spoiler zone.
The antagonist, the COO, annoying. Wanted him dead immediately.
Kill him off.
He was a character you hated from start to end. You wanted that man dead more than you wanted anyone to survive at some point. In terms of the story, he served as a very strong cautionary tale for the main character. His want for money, he felt that his life was worth more than everyone else's. His whole deal was definitely meant to just show what the main character had the potential to become if he didn't, you know, choose to care about his daughter.
Baseline good dad behavior.
The bar is on the floor. And you know what? He passed it in the end, but at the beginning it's a rocky road.
I think it's interesting that it's like implied that the main character almost played a role in this outbreak. He knew something was gonna go wrong, and rather than doing something about it, he chose to profit off of it instead. I think it's an interesting little thing to include, to chew on, to add to the guilt that he probably feels and his desire to make it right. But yeah, like you said, the antagonist is a cautionary tale, and you do hate him the whole time, but for me, right at the very end, where he's turning and he like asks for his mom, I did feel bad for him. Which is, I know that you did. I'm a soft little guy. I saw him asking for his mommy. I was like, oh, he wants his mommy. poor little guy. Anyone else on the train that sucks is essentially because they're scared. And truly he is scared too, but he's straight up willing to exploit everyone else's fear to get them to do what he wants to preserve himself. I didn't feel that kind of hatred for anyone else on the train, even the people that were like agreeing with the things he had to say, because it's clear that they were just following the most, like, the loudest voice in the room, which was him.
Give it a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10 for the antagonist. As far as the tension goes, that was all tense out the whole movie. Everyone could die at any moment, and I was scared. 10 out of 10 for tension. There was a point where I thought it was gonna be an everybody dies movie.
10 out of 10. Unpredictability. 10 out of 10 for unpredictability as well. There was never a point in this movie where I knew who was going to survive. After that first death happened with the character that I was so sure was gonna make it, also I knew he was gonna die because he was too strong. He was such a good dad. He wasn't even a dad yet, he was such a good dad. 10 out of 10 for him. Just him.
R.I.P.
Okay, end of spoiler time.
So welcome back, spoiler-free people.
Spoiler-free.
We highly recommend this movie. If you only watch one movie on this whole list, make it this one.
Show it to all your friends.
Yeah.
Cry together. It's such a
Cry
good bonding
together.
moment. Don't watch Peninsula. There's a sequel to this movie. Don't watch it. It's not a movie, in fact. Forget I mentioned it. Even as a standalone zombie movie, it's not good. This isn't on the list because I didn't make Danny watch it.
I didn't watch it.
Don't watch it though, it's not worth it. It wasn't worth my time to rewatch it to give you a review.
And we watched some bad movies.
We watched some bad ones.
Speaking of bad movies that you shouldn't watch, next up we have Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. What a piece of garbage cash grab sack of sh**.
I thought the movie was good the first time I watched it, but I also got a job offer call a good like 10 minutes into the movie and I missed like the first chunk of the movie. Employment, better than this movie.
You ready for the character depth?
Character depth.
0 out of 10. Bunch of caricatures with no depth. As much depth as a piece of paper. Less depth, because at least a piece of paper, technically, they're 2D. They're little cartoon men. The beginning of this movie is literally, it's a heist team-up sequence. This is a heist movie, but this stupid zombie movie is a heist movie.
We are putting together a crew for a job.
Yeah, what does it pay?
There's a zombie town. Go steal a vault of riches from the zombie town. Go heist it, which might sound fun, but it's not. These characters are inconsistent as hell. Their dialogue is so corny. There's characters who do like nothing notable, say nothing notable throughout the entire movie, and then out of nowhere, they'll pull one of the main characters aside and start going on a monologue that like includes some backstory you didn't know existed. Talking about when we get out of here, you want to do this. And you're like, oh, you haven't said like anything of note before this moment, you're definitely about to die. And then they do, and it's like, well, I'm gonna walk this one off, I'm gonna cool down while Mac talks about the characters for this one.
I give it a 3 out of 10. They did their job as little heist guys. They fit their little heist caricatures that needed to be filled for the sake of, you know, stealing a vault worth of money, I think it was. I don't even remember what they were trying to do. 3 out of 10. They did their job. Were they realistic? Of course not. It's a Zack Snyder movie. Zombie lore. I actually liked the zombie lore in this movie.
I did too.
The zombies were probably the only thing the effort was put into them. They definitely acted in a way that you wouldn't expect for zombies. Arguably some of the most original zombies that I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to see in a movie that it's not good.
If the whole movie had been about the zombies and not about the people, I probably would have really enjoyed it, actually. There's a whole hierarchy system with these zombies. I'm not gonna give away too much because if for some godforsaken reason you do watch this movie, that'll be like the only thing you enjoy about it. There was actually so much going on that they didn't bother explaining. Like at one point they're like, oh, the rain makes the zombies wake up because there's like a pile of inactive zombies by the entrance of the place. And you're like, oh, it's definitely gonna rain then. And we're gonna see them all come. It didn't rain. They just said that for fun, so you would know, I guess.
I don't remember that.
Their behavior is cool. There's like variants and stuff. It's all interesting. Maybe just watch the movie and fast forward through any part with human beings on screen, and you'll
Skip
have
the entire beginning.
You'll have like a fun
First hour.
30 minutes movie. 8 out of 10 on zombie lore for me.
Pacing.
I already rambled about the heist thing, but the heist thing, to be clear, takes place for the entire first hour of the movie. It takes an hour for them to get to the city with the zombies in it. And the pacing doesn't get better. I feel like that alone is egregious enough to give it like a low score. I will go back to pacing when we get to the spoiler section. This is the spoiler section now. So towards the end of the movie, they've made it to the vault, so they've got the money. The army is going to nuke the city. They're all aware of this. They get to the vault, they get to the money, and they all have a fun little dance sequence where they're celebrating that they got the money that they need to lug out to the helicopter on the roof. They're like throwing it and shit. Oh my gosh, we got the money. There's zombies outside and a nuke coming.
All right, come on, let's go, guys. We got about 20 minutes before this place is dust.
I give the pacing a 2 out of 10. You wanna go?
Yeah, I'll go.
Mac is concerned.
Not any more than I usually am.
What the fuck? What does that mean?
The opening sequence, probably like the first 10-15 minutes of the movie, where they're showing like how the zombies came to be. Probably my favorite part of the movie. There's like a whole opening song. It's very like Zombieland-esque, like slow-mo shots. It slapped, I'm not gonna lie. If you're gonna watch the movie, stop after the first 15 minutes and you're good. Actually skip like the first 2 minutes and then watch it and then stop. Because like the actual beginning, bad. The opening song, perfect. For the overall movie, like a 4 out of 10. They kept coming to things that like sounded like they were gonna speed up the plot and then they didn't. It was like throwing a paper airplane and watching it hit the ground immediately after you threw it.
Next up, we got antagonist, and I just put boo. I'm not saying anything else. I put a 1 out of 10. I have nothing to say.
I gave him a 2 out of 10. He's the grandfather from Bullet Train. I think he's just kind of hot, and that's all I gotta say.
That got it up to 2.
Yeah, it was an extra point because the actor was hot. There's this entire bit about like, oh my gosh, maybe the antagonist is like actually the real life devil. This is purgatory and we're stuck in here for the evil deeds that we did when this zombie town first came to be. And then they all like laugh it off. They're all like, nah, and they continue. And that's it. That's all the development you get for the antagonist, and it's thrown in as a joke, I think. I can't tell if it was supposed to be funny or not, or if it's just supposed to be something to like ignite theories for the movie, but there's no point in theories if you're gonna throw it at us and then have no evidence to support it.
That kind of shit happens a lot in the movie, where a crazy idea is introduced and then it's just not followed up on at all. A good example of that would be the cyborg zombies. There are cyborg zombies. There's just 2 of them. They're just there. And it's because Zack Snyder wants to make a cinematic universe out of this garbage.
There's an entire bit where they talk about it being purgatory, and while the character is monologuing essentially about how they're stuck here and they're never meant to make it out because there's another version of themselves that has to come and try again, and it pans to a bunch of skeletons. Like it cuts between the skeletons wearing their clothes and the character that's currently alive.
They like point it out.
It's so in your face, and then nothing.
Nothing.
0. And maybe that was for the cinematic universe, but it doesn't matter.
That's not how you do cinematic universes. Like maybe it is, but it shouldn't be. Where you have entire scenes dedicated to nothing but a potential future project for your franchise. And it's just jarring and doesn't fit with the current movie.
This movie is the reason I didn't want to watch Justice League.
For tension, I put 3 out of 10. Y'all can die. I'm never scared for any of these guys. No one who dies, it's a surprise.
I didn't care enough about any of these characters to feel any type of tension. 4 out of 10.
Unpredictability was very low. You always knew when people were gonna die. Lots of things happened that I didn't expect, and none of them were for the better. I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
I have nothing to add. I also give it a 4 out of 10.
This is unfortunately an open-ended movie because he does want to make a cinematic universe out of it, and he has done a prequel for a character, and as far as I'm aware, that prequel had nothing to do with zombies.
No zombies.
Which was the most interesting part of the movie. So let's hope they're all finished.
One can hope.
I need to calm down. Let's talk about a good movie.
Well, too bad, because we're going to be talking about Pontypool.
I'm gonna cry.
No one cares. Pontypool is an indie Canadian zombie movie.
It was interesting.
I would recommend it if you're pretentious and also you're cool with a bit of racism. It's very in your like as soon as it happened I was like, oh. Some
characters walk in and you're like, what are they gonna do with that? And then they start doing exactly what you were scared of. And you're like, oh no.
The characters are in race face. I wouldn't have watched it if I knew there was race face in it.
It was like played for laughs in a movie that has no other comedic bits.
There was no other humor in the movie besides that.
Even if you were racist, you wouldn't find this scene funny. That's how bad it was.
Funny. It wasn't even funny in the racist way.
It was just bad.
And if you can overlook that bad bit, then
you have another pretty shitty movie.
Yeah. You have a movie that's bad for a different reason.
Is everyone in the room cool with me just reading off my notes I wrote about this?
I'm not cool with that. I can't believe you're doing that.
Okay, I want to go. These are some of the least realistic characters I've ever seen depicted on screen. They're doing a radio show. The whole movie is in a radio booth, which in concept, like during a zombie apocalypse, in concept is a fun idea. This guy's enjoyable sometimes, but he just doesn't behave normally. Even before zombies started showing up, the conflict between the characters felt so unnatural and strange that it made my head spin. Spoiler section starts now because who cares?
Bad movie.
Why are y'all talking so much? Why did you guys kiss? Why is Sydney making annoying assumptions and treating them as facts throughout the entire movie? These are all questions that will forever go unanswered. I gave these characters a 2 out of 10. I only kind of liked the main character, but he was also really racist randomly.
For me, the characters at the beginning of the movie felt like they could have been realistic in some sense, but as the movie moved further in, they started having these reactions that were just inhuman. They watched one of their friends die, like fully on the other side of the glass. She was less than 5 feet away, and they watched her full die. They watched her completely turn, and they just stand unflinchingly watching her. There's no look of horror, there's no any emotion for that matter. They're straight-faced just staring at her.
And the dialogue following that didn't even address it. They just start talking about other shit, like immediately.
They didn't care about that girl.
It was so weird.
There's romance that's completely out of left field. None of these characters have any chemistry outside of we're supposed to survive this apocalypse together now, I guess. I give it a 3 out of 10.
The zombie lore was probably the most interesting thing about this weird movie. Like, it's a pretentious, fun concept. The zombies talk. Here's something I wrote. I think it's actually possible that absolutely nothing was ever supposed to make sense as revealed in a line of dialogue in the closing minutes, where he says, "Nothing we've been saying has been making any sense." It's really clear that words like play a big role in whatever the hell's going on. The virus is like a word that gets in your head, but it's like different words and with different meanings. It's hard to understand. But what a frustrating movie to sit through while desperately trying to understand what was never meant to be understood. If this was the intention, I can honestly respect the concept, but I cannot recommend this as an unironic thing to enjoy. It's fun to think about the idea that people can be consumed by words that are spoken, and I think with a better everything, this could have been an interesting movie. It was just poorly executed and really confusing. You finish the movie confused. And then you get a post-credit scene that makes you more confused, so.
There's more racism in this.
There is more racism. My theory that nothing was supposed to make sense is probably not the true one, because I think Mac had a better theory. That was probably what they were going for.
Yeah. So with the zombies, what happens, as far as we understand it as the audience, is there's a word that gets into a person's head. Each person has a different word that affects them. They repeat it over and over and over again until they just lose control of themselves, essentially. For some reason, that compels them to eat people. After several articles that I looked at from back in 2008, the virus is supposed to represent political propaganda, which is crazy to think about. Again, it was an interesting concept, and if they executed it, I don't know, with just more thought in it, then it could have been something. It's supposed to represent how political propaganda can go from one person to another, and they'll just repeat it without thought. So in order to stop that, people have to think about the words that they're saying and allow them to have a different meaning. I give it a 6.5.
I gave it a 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5? 5 out of 10. Yeah, just perfect zombies.
Perfect zombies all the way around. For the pacing, it was probably my favorite part of the movie. Just the way that they were able to build up to something actually sinister happening. You knew something was wrong, but you didn't quite know what, and with how interesting and different the zombies were, there was really no telling what could happen next. I think it was up into like the 21-minute mark, the 20-minute mark, that things actually started picking up and you knew that something was genuinely dangerous happening. But before that, it's just these little violent bits or these little bits of confusion with just this edge of horror in it that was just really interesting. I enjoyed those first 20 minutes. Minus the racist bit, which I think was in the first 20 minutes.
The first half of the movie, before the zombies get there, I actually did really enjoy the pacing. It was slow, but it was scary. It felt like a really big build-up, and then the payoff like just wasn't worth it. The whole scene where they first go, they see the zombies, but we don't see the zombies, but we hear the zombies, and it's just a lot of confusing audio editing work going on at the same time. The people he was just screaming at for no apparent reason, he's now like, we're in this together. It's all very sudden and weird, like incredibly off-putting. It just derails itself, and I don't think it ever fixes itself from that point forward. It's just like things just happen with no regard for structure or timing or anything.
What's going on? Those are my words. Those are my words. What is going on?
I give pacing a 4 out of 10 because it was pretty damn good until it really wasn't.
I also give it a 4 out of 10.
So the tension, the only character that was even a little bit likable was also a racist little hothead. So, you know, I didn't really actually care if he died. He was just the most entertaining person. So I was never scared for the characters, and I never knew if I should be. I really didn't care. The sound design for the beginning section where you start to hear like some of the zombie apocalypse happen was so strange to me that like I could never buy into it. I never didn't feel like I was just watching a movie. Like you mentioned before, the girl dying right in front of them and them just acting like it's a normal occurrence. When zombies show up like in the room they're in and they're like, the solution is to not speak. They never shut the f. They don't ever stop talking after they figure out you shouldn't talk.
Okay, you are talking a lot right now.
I was tense because the movie wouldn't end. 2 out of 10.
I actually enjoyed the tension. I believe it went hand in hand with the pacing. Just the build up to something you didn't understand. Outside of the very obvious weird reactions that we got. So like the entire back half of the movie, I really liked the tension. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Kind of up there just for the beginning portion, but after that it kind of just goes downhill.
Unpredictability.
Like I said, these zombies were almost entirely original. I haven't seen anything like them before, even if they weren't executed perfectly. The concept was there, the concept was interesting. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 for unpredictability.
There was never a single moment in this movie where I understood what the f was going on, which made it actually incredibly entertaining to watch, and I give it a 10 out of 10 for unpredictability. I felt like I was having a fever dream. This movie ends and you have so many questions, and then there's another scene at the end and you're like, am I gonna get some answers? And you're just left with double the questions.
It gets worse.
Pontypool, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, welcome to Mac Corner. Danny and I both have a corner where we discuss a movie that doesn't particularly fit into our rubric, or we just didn't have time to discuss that we still wanted to touch on. We are still going to be using the rubric, even if it doesn't quite apply, just for the sake of continuity. I'm going to be touching on Warm Bodies. That sounded weird, pause. It is a romance zombie movie. Not a particularly good one, but I think it's fun and I think it's worth being discussed. Both Danny and I watched it and he did not like it as much as I did. I just thought it was fun. It wasn't a particularly deep movie. Again, it is very surface level. Slow zombies, zombie apocalypse, characters trying to survive. It's very 2013 Tumblr humor. If that's up your alley, even if it's just for nostalgia reasons, definitely worth the watch. There isn't a whole lot to expect out of a romance zombie movie, so the characters were pretty two-dimensional. For character depth, I'm gonna go ahead and give that a 4 out of 10. With the zombie lore, the entire movie services how these zombies are going to progress without getting too much into spoilers. The main character that we're following is a zombie, so we do get a little bit of insight into how those zombies are operating without getting too exposition-y or too scientific with it. Again, this is a romance zombie movie, so gotta keep it at a certain level of unrealism. I'm gonna give the zombie lore a 6 out of 10. I didn't have any huge issues with the pacing as much as I can remember. I wouldn't say particularly immersive, but definitely a fun watch. I would give it a 6 out of 10 for pacing. As far as antagonists go, there's only one true antagonist, and he doesn't really show up until the end of the movie. The rest of the movie is kind of a will they, won't they romance. Kind of weird when you consider one person is a zombie, but if you don't look too into it, then it's not as weird. But yeah, for antagonists, maybe a 4 out of 10. So with tension, this doesn't fit the rubric. It's a 1 out of 10 for tension. This is a romance zombie movie. There is absolutely no tension. No one's going to die. Everyone's gonna fall in love. There was an okay unpredictability factor. Ooh, I'm gonna enter spoiler corner here. Spoiler corner, spoiler spot. With unpredictability, there is obviously a solid lead up to the zombies being cured with love, which is fun. It's not quite something that you would really expect, I think, from a zombie movie. When there's a cure, it's usually, you know, medicine. Again, not realistic. It's a zombie romance. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10 for unpredictability. Exiting spoiler corner. Overall, this is a fun movie if you're looking to just waste some time. It's not anything particularly, you know, world-renowned or, you know what, it is a little original. I will give it that. I don't think I've seen anything quite like it, for better or for worse. That's all for Mac's Corner. Tune in never. Bye!
I Am a Hero. I Am a Hero is a fun movie. It's based on a manga. It's really fun. We did watch some haha funny comedy zombie movies too, but we decided not to give reviews to those because they really don't fit the rubric. But this was a movie that took itself seriously enough that it did feel like it fell into this category, but it was also just a really fun movie, and I'd say it's probably the most fun movie on this list.
Let's jump straight into it.
Character depth.
Character depth.
At the beginning of the movie, you get the main guy's motivations, and you end up really rooting for him really quickly, just like in his life goals, because you feel so bad for him. And then he's thrown into a zombie apocalypse, and in your head, you see like a natural progression of what he should do here, like what you think would make him satisfied, and then you see him struggle with that. It's an interesting little dilemma that he deals with throughout the movie. I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, the other two like main characters of the movie do not have nearly as much depth as I feel like they should. Without getting into spoilers, just one of them has some really cool stuff going on, and the other one seems to have like a really interesting worldview, and none of that is like ever explored. Like they each get like one scene where it's like, oh, this is cool, I can't wait to see what's gonna happen with this, and the answer is not much. They're just kind of there for the rest of the movie, and it's like, okay, whatever. It was a little disappointing. I will also say there's one really weird moment in this movie where he contemplates kissing a sleeping underage person, which is what? It truly has no impact on anything and doesn't come back.
A weird 2 minutes that you have to sit through.
Why was that there? We will never know.
And we shouldn't know. There should be nothing that comes from it.
Yeah.
Cut it out immediately.
So I docked a point for that moment, because truly without that moment it would have been fine, but that it was just such an off-putting thing to have happen. Outside of that, his stuff was pretty solid, so it would have been a 7 out of 10, but because of that moment, the character depth gets a 6 out of 10 from me.
I enjoyed this movie. The main character was cool in his own right. It very much felt like the hero's journey for just some guy. That's fun. Outside of his progression, there wasn't a lot of character development for any of the other characters. Even when things that happened to the characters should have pushed a good amount of character development, nothing really came from it. And there wasn't any satisfying payoff for any of the characters outside of the main character. Very two-dimensional, very much just there to push forward his character development.
Yeah.
So I give it a good 5 out of 10. For zombie lore, these zombies, beautiful,
Tasty.
delicious. Gotta love it. I think a big issue or obstacle a lot of zombie media faces is the inconsistency with their zombies. There's rules set forward for these zombies, and sometimes they just don't follow them, whether it be for story reasons or just a mess up on the part of the writers. Where I Am Hero is different with that. All of the zombies are weird. Each zombie is so unique in their own right that you really get to explore this virus that isn't supposed to make sense. There's an entire bit in the movie where they talk about, hey, these zombies do weird things, and then there's ones that are just inhuman in their weird things. They're still nasty looking, so you still get that really fun, gory aspect. There's a good mix of practical and CGI effects. I give it a 9 out of 10. I found it really, really fun.
These are hands down the most fun zombies from anything on this whole list. They also talk. Did you say that? Did you say that?
I didn't say that. I forgot that they
talk. I think they achieved what Pontypool was trying to achieve, not in message, but in vibes. They're all incredibly unique. Them speaking adds to that, because some of them do just repeat nonsense. Some of them have like a clear like moment that they're trapped in from their human lives, which is like almost terrifying if it wasn't also so much fun. My favorite scene in these zombie shows and movies and stuff is the outbreak scene. I think it can be one of the most fun sequences in the film or show or whatever, and this was hands down my favorite one out of all of them. The uniqueness to every zombie really added to the flavor of everything going on. They're yelling at each other. It's so scary and fun. This one's a must watch for the fun alone, for the outbreak scene alone.
Yeah,
it's so much fun. And late in the movie, there's some really creepy zombies doing some really cool stuff too. Like, it's not like a spoiler for plot reasons, it's just a spoiler for cool reasons. Like, that's some cool shit that zombies do, and you just gotta see it for yourself. 9 out of 10 zombies, baby. 9 out of 10 zombie lore. They don't bog you down with exposition either. Let them run wild. Now, the pacing for a 2-hour movie, the pacing is pretty damn good. There's a couple of scenes that I would cut down by a few minutes. There's like a few moments where it feels like it drags. It really is only those few moments. Overall, it's like essentially from the moment you see the first zombie, it's go, go, go.
Spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone. We want to talk about a scene.
I enjoyed the pacing from start to finish. This didn't feel like a 2-hour-long movie. Everything moved very smoothly. For me, ironically, the only part that really dragged was the final battle. It just felt like a lot was repeating over and over again. I understand the tension. I feel like if the rewatch that I just had was the first time I watched it, I would have been just as immersed, like a repeat viewer. You knew what was gonna happen, so it did just feel like it dragged on a little longer.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I have only watched it one time so far. It was a really long, repetitive fight, but for some reason I enjoyed it, probably just because they were interesting, fun little zombies. It kept happening where it's like, you think it's over, and then it's not. So I can see how that gets repetitive and boring. It was interesting because it made me feel bad for people I didn't even care about before, just because of the main character's reaction to it, you know?
8 out of 10 for pacing.
7 out of 10 for pacing for me, because there were those few scenes that I would cut down several minutes of. Because we're in spoiler section, I do want to say, for character depth, the girl that turns into a zombie, like she has a cool scene right when she turns, and then she doesn't really do anything that cool for the rest of the movie. And I kept waiting for her to do something. Even in the final fight, she just sat there the whole time. And you could argue that there's probably a lore reason, like it's because she's not eating people, she doesn't have the energy for it or something. But it's like, it wasn't fun, you know? It makes you feel really bad right when she turns because she's such this happy-go-lucky character. Like, it's all the life drained from her. And so that's interesting right at first, but then they just don't do anything else with it. And I found that to be really disappointed because I was so intrigued. Could have done more, could have done more.
Could have done more. She was a plot device after she got bit. So for the antagonist, little freak. Little weirdo, little man in the sewer. What a dweeb. He comes off with this energy that is very, like, it's very surprising that people are willing to follow him. I could dropkick that man easily. He'd be gone. There's this entire colony of people that are following him. It just felt very surprising. This god complex for this dude that could be blown away by the wind.
He built like me.
When he was bit, that was probably the most interesting anything that his character did throughout the entirety of his appearance in the movie. Everything before that is whatever. I give him a 5 out of 10.
It seems to be a very common theme in zombie media where you have an antagonist that is nothing more than like a selfish asshole who's on a power trip. That can be interesting sometimes when you just have a movie, you can't really flesh out that kind of character that quickly. This definitely wasn't an exception. The selfish on a power trip was just that. There was nothing more to him. He was just a mean little creepy little guy, and the most interesting thing he did was turn into a zombie, because the zombies in this movie are interesting and fun. The movie wasn't really about this guy, he was just there. I don't think he took away from the movie, it just, I didn't care about him. 3 out of 10 antagonist, cause whatever. So for the tension, it was pretty scary for a while, but after they arrived to the roof, the safe haven place led by the antagonist, it became pretty clear that, okay, the 3 main characters are going to survive. There still was tension present because you didn't know if the people around them would make it and how much they would lose in the process. 6.5 for the tension because it was a lot higher stakes before that, and then after that I wasn't sure if any of the side characters would make it out.
As far as the tension for me, the outbreak scene, a lot of tension. Just the adrenaline, I think, of zombies showing up. Gotta love it. Beautiful. For the majority of the movie, there wasn't a lot of tension for me. I felt like the main characters were going to live all the way up until the final battle where people started just dropping. At that point, I was kind of debating on whether or not it was an everybody dies movie. I was scared. I'll give it a solid 7 out of 10 for that.
With the zombies themselves especially, like you never know what kind of monsters are gonna get thrown at you. Not only is the way they talk and move different, like their behavior is very different, so the way they attack is gonna be different. I didn't know what was going on. In a good way though, not in a Pontypool way. I give 7 out of 10 for unpredictability.
I gave unpredictability an 8 out of 10 for all the same reasons that I scored tension so high. Fear for just everyone's life at the end, and like you said, the originality and the uniqueness of the zombies. You had no idea what anyone was going to turn into. It was scary. It was fun.
We recommend this movie a whole freaking lot, dude.
Great movie.
You gotta watch this one. It's a fun one. This is the most fun movie on this list, I think.
Easily.
Yeah. Do you think we can cover hashtag alive in 4 minutes? Okay guys, so there's 4.5 minutes left on my camera memory card, so we're gonna cover hashtag alive in that time, okay? Go, go, go.
Hashtag Alive is a Korean zombie movie. It came out during the pandemic. It was very, very well renowned. People loved this movie. We hated it.
Why did y'all like it so much?
It was not that good of a movie. I think
character depth? I gave it a 2 out of 10. Matt gave it a 4.5 out of 10. I didn't like it at all. They made no sense. Like the most interesting thing anyone ever does is when this girl like gives some of her plants some water, some of her precious drinking water. But nothing about her character makes sense for her to do that because she's got these survival instincts, and like everything about her character makes you think that she wouldn't do that. So the most interesting thing she did was the most inconsistent thing she could have done. And inconsistency is key here. This is an incredibly inconsistent, stupid movie. Also, I'm gonna play a clip. Wasn't that a stupid clip? It's the one where he's leaning out the window. That was dumb. That's the kind of movie you're watching. Go!
Oh my goodness, the main character... The main character just makes a lot of choices that would not line up with someone who was planning on surviving for a long period of time. Outside of his very few emotional-based scenes that he has where he's alone in his apartment, there isn't a lot to enjoy with his character, especially within the first half of the movie. I believe he picks up more in the second half, but just for the sake of his like character overall, kind of annoying.
He writes down "stay alive" on a post-it note and keeps looking at that as if it's like really motivating him. Like, oh, I was about to die. I should have looked at the post-it note. He tries to end his own life at one point. I guess he forgot to look. He didn't look at he's gotta look at the post. Zombie lore, I gave a 3 out of 10. You gave a 4 out of 10. They're pretty boring.
Very, very boring zombies.
They were so inconsistent.
It was If I Am Hero zombies were
And
bad.
the sound design was so corny too. Like the first zombie turns, for 1 second you're like, oh, this is gonna be cool. And then it... Oh, okay, this is gonna be corny. Pacing, I give it a 2 out of 10, unlike this video, which is expertly paced. 2 out of 10, this movie was terribly paced.
I gave this movie a 5 out of 10. The entire first half of the movie was very boring to me. He was just in his apartment, and I get that this is a quarantine movie. He's supposed to stay #alive. It was very boring for the sake of a storytelling device. This wasn't anything.
Antagonist, I gave a 2 out of 10 because what a boring guy. There's this guy, spoiler alert.
Spoiler zone.
His wife turns into a zombie, he kidnaps people to feed them. I literally thought, what if that happened? And I was like, no way, that would be stupid. And then it happened. He just had to look outside to see all those zombies not eating and being alive to know that his wife would have stayed alive. It was stupid, it was forced, it was goofy. 2 out of 10 guy. Glad he's dead.
Good actor though, good actor.
I do like the actor quite a
4 out of
bit
10.
actually.
4 out of 10.
Tension, I gave a 2 out of 10, you gave a 4 out of 10. I wrote, the only times I felt scared were during these stupid bullshit jump scares that were stupid and dumb and I hated it. I was never scared for the characters' lives. In fact, I thought it was ridiculous they both survived when they f***ing jumped out their windows into the crowd of zombies. Are you yanking my leg right now? I hate this movie so much. It was so frustrating.
I thought the tension was fine. Could have been better.
Unpredictability, I gave a 3 out of 10. You gave a 4 out of 10.
Oh, you weren't gonna
We
say
have
something?
30 seconds.
Oh my goodness. It's over.
If they ever make another #alive movie, I will #unalive myself.
End of speedrun movies.
I might have been overly harsh because I was yelling fast, but
I think that was fine.
was there anything about the movie that I liked? I'm trying to remember.
The
Because I was
emotional
mostly
acting was fine.
bored. Yeah, the acting was great. Shout out the actors.
Even though one of them got a bunch of drugs found in his system recently.
Oh no. We forgot to do that for the last movie because we sped run it, but now it's time for Cargo 2017. How do you talk about this without spoiling it?
That's what I was wondering.
Here's what we'll do. We will do a speed run, but we're just going to talk about things without any spoilers, and then we're going to do the actual review with the spoilers.
Okay.
And I'll explain that.
As far as the main character goes, I didn't see a whole lot of growth in him, honestly. I feel like he stayed pretty consistent over the course of the movie, which made sense given how short the time span of the movie in canon is. The other characters, a lot more fun. which we'll
I
get
do
into
like
later.
those guys.
I give the character depth an 8 out of 10.
Zombie lore. The zombies weren't particularly scary, but they were very different from, I'd say, a lot of the other zombies. Pieces of their behavior and also in their appearance that are very unique to this movie.
Nasty. Nasty.
They are really gross. I give the zombie lore a 7 out of 10.
They were very consistent. There were rules set for these zombies, and honestly, they stuck really well with them, I think. I don't think there was any inconsistencies with the zombies. I give the zombie lore a 7.5 out of 10 just for that beautiful consistency with their behavior. With pacing, there wasn't a whole lot of really action-heavy scenes in this movie, but it didn't matter, and it was able to keep your attention, and you really felt put into this world. Honestly, just felt very immersed in the movie. I absolutely loved it. It was very easy to follow.
It is a pretty slow burn of a movie, but it's like it all takes place in, what is it, like 3 days total? It is a very simple story and it explores all the aspects of that one simple story. It was paced well.
8 out of 10.
Antagonist was a bad dude. 7.5 out of 10, no spoilers.
8 out of 10, no spoilers.
The tension was really high for me for the whole movie. It's a movie that has very little action, and yet you're on the edge of your seat the whole time. So I gave the tension a 9 out of 10.
I also gave the tension a 9 out of 10. The situation at hand is just very high risk. You're worried the entire movie just because of how high the risk of this is.
Literally
Without
not a
spoilers?
moment that you're not scared. As far as predictability goes, I guessed like one of the very first plot beats, and then I could not have told you anything else that was gonna happen. With the premise of it, I thought I knew how it was gonna end, and I thought I wasn't gonna like it, and I was pleasantly surprised. 9 out of 10 for unpredictability.
I also gave it a 9 out of 10. I don't think I had any guesses going into this movie. I went into it completely blind, and I was pleasantly surprised at every story beat, whether it be out of pure sadness or just very impressed with how the movie was going. Extra points because Danny cried.
Bonus points for me crying.
Bonus points for crying Danny. Spoiler zone.
Spoiler time. I'm going to spoil the entire movie now. You got a guy, you got his wife, you got his baby. Wife gets bit, she dies. You learn that if you get bit, you have, what is it?
48 hours.
Exactly, 48 hours until you turn. The dad gets bit by the wife. So our main character is bitten, like in the first act of the movie. He has to find a place for his baby. He feels very self-centered, but at the same time, it's like you come to realize that he is trying to just get his kid to the best place he possibly can before he's gone. He's probably thinking, I don't have time to deal with anyone else's problems. I just have to get this thing done. I originally thought with the way that one of the main characters was talking that this movie was gonna do a racism, but it turns out that actually just that character was kind of doing a racism.
I believe that the zombie virus was supposed to represent colonization, and so having those natives in the movie and being people that were able to survive and cleanse the land obviously was important for the story aspect, but was also just a very interesting story beat. I enjoyed it a lot. No! When I said that his character didn't develop very much over the course of the film, I think that's truly because even though he was the main character, this story was not about him. I still found him to be a very enjoyable character. I found every character that came on screen, minus our antagonist, to be a very enjoyable character. 8 out of 10. all the way around. With the zombie lore, we are immediately introduced into a world where they have a very good hand on what the zombie infection does. There's little pamphlets, there's ways to treat the zombie infection, there's watches that you're able to keep the amount of time that you have left.
If you get bit, yeah.
Yes.
I like when they stick their heads in the sand. The antagonist, that's a bad guy.
Very much just there to personify capitalism. Bad white man.
He was like, I'm gonna make as much money as I can off of this virus. He doesn't care who he takes down with him, especially people of color and women.
Gross.
It's a pretty straightforward metaphor when you think about it. He had some sort of depth to his character. At the very end, I was like wondering if he felt bad about what he had done. You know, he had some line he wouldn't cross, which was baby murder. He crossed all the other ones before that.
Very on the ground.
The tension. Homie is bit. Homie is gonna die, and wherever he dies is where that baby is gonna be. There's not a moment where you're not scared, even when like there's not an imminent threat, because you can see this virus taking over his body and you're like, oh god. You don't need action when you have stakes like that.
You have fear. Just
have
pure raw fear.
I don't usually like having to take care of a child in an apocalypse type beat. Like I get it, but it's boring to me. It's like stressful in a way that I don't like, but I liked this a lot.
I think it also helped that the baby Rosie was just such a calm child overall.
Like they didn't put annoying stuff in there.
Yeah. There wasn't like sneak away scenes where she suddenly started crying for no reason.
Yeah.
Put more chill babies in zombie movies.
Honestly, please.
Exit spoiler zone.
Welcome back, spoiler free people. This is a highly recommended movie. Really good one. It made me sob. Like I didn't expect to cry either. Like I knew it would be sad and then I cried anyway.
I knew I was gonna cry. I watched it first. I knew
of course, Mak and I would cry.
I only recommend movies that make people cry.
What the f? Hey guys, welcome back to Danny's Corner. As you all know, this is my corner. This is my favorite place to be. Hey, shut the f up. God. Today I'm going to be talking about I Am Legend, which is a zombie movie from 2007. I watched this one with Mac, and they thought it was okay, and I was like, alright, well I guess I'll just talk about it myself. So I thought it was okay. Let's dive right into this. Let's jump right into the character depth right here. We got the lead role, Will Smith in the lead role. He's a little zombie fighting guy. And he's from the military, and he's stuck around on the island where all the zombies are for many, many years after all of humanity left. So he hasn't like spoken with people in that long. His only companion is his little doggy friend. He's going a little crazy, having not been in contact with another human being for years, and that at first manifests in just he's talking to his dog a whole whole lot more than most people talk to their dogs, which I think is fair. However, the point where it lost me was when he goes to this like store that he set up a bunch of mannequins in, and he's talking to all of them like real people, and then he sees one that's like a woman mannequin, and he like pretends to be shy, and he's like looking at it. And this is such a long bit too. And then it continues after he leaves the store because he's talking to the dog about the mannequin. It really lost me on that part, and I really couldn't buy his character for much longer after. He does some stuff later in the movie that is just really unlikable. He does like work in a little lab, and I think that's the most interesting side of him, is when he's just doing his work. As ridiculous as it is to say, I wish there was much less at an attempt at character death in the movie, because I think I would have enjoyed it more if he was just working on the virus the whole time with like no emotion. Because the lore itself is interesting, but as a character, I'm gonna give this man a 3 out of 10. His goofy ass. Let's get into the zombie lore. So this movie came out in 2007, and the zombies are CGI. I think they're alright for being CGI in 2007. They do look a little scary, they scream a lot, I don't like the sound, but their behavior is really fascinating. These aren't your classic zombies, you hardly even see them bite people. They hang out in the shadows, they're scared of the sunlight, they kind of do this hibernation thing where they all just kind of stand in the dark and huddle and breathe heavily. There's a lot of foreshadowing for them to have more depth than you would expect a zombie to. At one point, Will sets a trap for a zombie because he's doing experiments on zombies, and then later in the movie, the same trap has been created by the zombies. It's interesting. Shut up. I'm gonna do an 8 out of 10 for the zombie lore. Best part of the movie. The pacing, especially at the beginning, really sucks. So I watched it again very recently, and I hadn't seen it for many years, and I had only remembered like 2 key things that happened. Throughout the beginning of it, I was like, oh god, did I just forget about this movie because it's forgettable? Because like nothing was happening. I was so sick of watching Will Smith do his little apocalypse daily routine. I just wanted things to go. The action scenes are a little interesting, but they're also so few and far between that it's like, come on. I think one of the action scenes in particular was really fun to watch. I liked seeing the zombies like working together and stuff, but most of them were some dumb Hollywood BS. Just a lot of nothing happened in this movie. A whole lot of nothing. I'm gonna say it's a 3 out of 10 pacing. For the antagonist, there isn't one of those. But for the tension, he has a dog, and you're definitely scared for the dog. There's a scene really early on where the dog runs into the dark, and Will Smith's like, no, don't run into the dark, that's where the zombies are. And that is where the zombies were, and it was a little frightening. It was also a little boring, because when Will Smith goes into the dark, there's a good 2 to 3 minutes where nothing happens, and he's just kind of standing there with a flashlight, too scared to go any further. And this is back to the pacing issue, but it was boring. It was really artificial tension, and that was the most annoying part. Finally, we have unpredictability. I couldn't have told you where it was gonna go, for better or for worse. I'd say it was unpredictable enough, and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. You are now entering spoiler territory. I'm gonna do some spoilers and talk about the ending a lot. So there are 2 endings to this movie. There's one official one, and it's a bunch of Hollywood BS, and I hate it. But then there's an unofficial alternative ending that was fully shot and edited and created that I thought was really interesting and added a lot more depth to it, but simultaneously, it makes the whole movie not make any sense. It's kind of the worst of both worlds. In the Hollywood version, so Will Smith comes across this lady who talks about God, and then Will Smith screams about how there is no God. And when I was watching this with Mac went, oh, this is a God movie. And I was like, I don't remember this being a God movie. It was a God movie. So throughout the movie, we kept seeing him have flashbacks to his daughter, who kept going, look at the butterfly with her hands, while he's trying to protect her from an apocalypse. She dies, by the way, but... And then at the end of the movie, he's like locked in a cage with this woman and her son, and the zombies are like slamming on the door, and it creates a crack of a butterfly. The cracks in the glass create the shape of 2 wings, very clearly supposed to be a butterfly. And then he notices the lady has a butterfly tattoo on her neck, and he's like, this is what it was all about. God is real. So he gives the lady the cure, because he just found that quite conveniently, and has her hide in a thing, and then he takes out a grenade and blows up all the zombies along with himself. So, in 2003, there was a movie from M. Night Shyamalan called Signs, which is also a God movie about aliens that you don't expect to be a God movie. And it does a very similar thing, except concept is not corny, stupid, and convoluted. It gives you these thematic elements throughout the movie, and then it still manages to surprise you by it, how important it actually ended up being. But it wasn't introduced in such a weird way. Like, no one's screaming about, there is no God, just out of nowhere. And then all the signs lined up to be something that actually made proper sense. In this movie, a zombie hit a door so much that it cracked into the shape of a butterfly, so he gave the lady with the butterfly tattoo a cure. And it was dumb and bad, and I didn't like it, and it was some Hollywood nonsense. So in the alternative ending, there's still the, like, butterfly-shaped crack on the door, but Will Smith decides to go out there and confront the zombies and say, I can save her. Because the reason they're all there is because he had kidnapped the zombie that he was running tests on. So he comes out very slowly. It's this really interesting high-tension scene. All the zombies are, like, yelling at him, and he's like, I need a syringe and all this stuff. There's clearly, like, an alpha zombie, and he ends up waking up the zombie that he had kidnapped and sedated, and she ends up going off with this pack of zombies that had rushed into his home. And during this whole scene, we see this wall of images of the faces that he had taken pictures of the zombies that he had kidnapped and run tests on. And every single one of them had died. This was something that was established earlier. We see this and we realize he was the villain all along. Not intentionally, but in his attempt to, like, find a cure, he had actually just become the monster to them. They weren't hunting him down just to kill him. They were hunting him down because he wouldn't stop killing all of them. That's the reason the movie is called I Am Legend, is because he had become this, like, legend, or this boogeyman to all these other zombies. Unfortunately, this ending doesn't really work because of all these, like, God setups that they had. It just doesn't work with the way the movie was created, which leads me to the question, why did y'all make the movie like that then? This movie is based on a book where the Will Smith was the villain all along, was the moral of the story. I mean, it's not Will Smith in the book, but you know. In fact, the title of the movie is about that. So how are you gonna just blow them all up with a grenade? That ruins everything. Like, when Will Smith kidnapped one of them, a zombie, like, exposed itself to sunlight willingly to, like, scream at him. And it's, like, an interesting thing that he notes. And it's like, well, that has no weight if you just blow it up later. Anyway, this is the end of the spoiler zone. Don't watch this movie. Thank you for coming to the Danny Corner. Let's get back to a regularly scheduled... Can you please shut... I'm gonna spray you. I'm gonna spray you.
The Girl with All the Gifts is a book and movie written by Mike Carey. He actually wrote the book and the screenplay at the exact same time, and I think that genuinely shows there's a lot of passion, a very easy story to follow. I read and I watched it. I love this series so much. Beautiful.
It's a very well-written movie in the sense that it does deal with a lot of more abstract concepts, and it's technically, there is a lot going on. It does a very good job of giving you a whole lot of information in a very easy-to-consume way, and it makes this really interesting story that much more entertaining to follow. This movie is up there with Train to Busan for my favorite movie on the list. It's either Train to Busan or this one. I really like this one.
I think this movie got the highest ratings, like our highest numerical ratings on the rubric.
Well, I was ecstatic when I finished it. Like, I was like blown away. It's a movie that I hadn't heard of before, and for most of the things on this list, when it was something that, like, I hadn't heard of before, I just assumed it wouldn't be the best. I was usually correct, but this was one that, like, I was watching. I kept asking, like, why haven't I heard of this before? This is so good. Why didn't it do well? And we'll get into that later. But for now, let's talk about the character depth. I love these characters. They felt so alive to me. Even though a lot of them have completely different ideologies, they don't get into these, like, emotional heated arguments. They just, like, make their statements, and then they all work together towards the same goal of getting to the next place alive. And that's something that I wish a lot more movies did, because I feel like in this life or death situation, that is how most people would act. Instead of, like, forced conflict between them, there was just conflicting ideas with the same goal. I really liked that. I enjoyed it. 10 out of 10. It does feel like right at the beginning of the movie where you're like, oh, okay, these guys are kind of just being assholes to be assholes, but you come to understand very shortly after that, like, oh, okay, they valid actually.
Our main character is a young girl, and through her eyes we're able to see this world for the first time with zombies that are pretty unique. So she's constantly very curious, constantly asking questions, and you're able to learn about the world through her because she gets these solid answers back from characters that do understand the world. So you get this exposition without it feeling like it's just being dumped onto you between two characters that already understand the world. Very well done. 10 out of 10, beautifully So with zombies, the zombies that we're looking at within this movie are created through the cordyceps virus, which is very well known now, given the popularity, or the new popularity, but also the old popularity of The Last of Us, because they have the cordyceps virus in there as well. The facility that was previously mentioned is where all the characters are from, so you do get a good amount of lore because you're talking to professionals that know this world. They understand the world building, they understand the virus. They're not just survivors, they're people who are actively working with this virus.
The zombie lore is revealed very slowly throughout the movie. The more you learn, the more questions you have, and every single one of those questions is going to get answers, and it's all in a really satisfying way. Nothing is ever dumped onto you in this drastic overhaul of exposition, and at the same time, it doesn't hide away too much either. To me, these were the most interesting zombies out of all the movies on this list. Took them in a direction that I don't think any other thing that we've watched takes them. That really surprised me, and I liked it a lot.
10 out of 10 on the zombie lore.
So the pacing was fantastic. I talked before about how I love it when a movie knows exactly what the audience wants, and this is definitely one of those movies. When we want to understand something better, it takes its time to slow down and explore a concept, and right when you're like, okay, I think I've had enough of this, it kicks right back into gear with the action. It also has a very tasty soundtrack. This is corny, but my favorite musical instrument is the human voice.
I didn't say anything.
You looked at anything. Whatever. I like the sound of people singing, and the soundtrack really utilizes that. It's a really unique soundtrack because of this, and it adds a lot to the feel of the whole movie. There's this one like kind of event that takes place multiple times throughout the movie that has this soundtrack that plays that feels like so unique and slightly disorienting, but in a peaceful way. It's like a feeling that I can't put into words because I don't think there's a name for the feeling, but they communicate it through this soundtrack. Again, it's a well-paced movie. It has these moments where everything stops and you're just basking in it. It's like, oh my god. So the pacing is also a 10 out of 10 for me.
No extra notes. 10 out of 10 pacing.
Slay.
While there are no villains in this movie, there are antagonists, and I would have beat them up so fast. Easily. 10 out of 10.
I love stories that are so nuanced where you understand where everyone's coming from and you don't really fault anyone for their actions or ideas. This movie has someone that you're rooting against that you completely sympathize with. It goes hand in hand with the character depth where just everyone's fully fleshed out. You don't have any questions about like, oh, why would they do that? It's beautiful. 10 out of 10. So tension. It was a pretty tense movie. There is one character that you never quite feel is in that much danger aside from like the very beginning. Throughout the whole movie, you're like scared because of like the unpredictability element of that character and what they might do to the rest of the group. Most of the people in the group play a really important role in this world that they live in, and it's like, well, I hope they all get there in one piece then. 9 out of 10, I would say.
Despite this movie technically being a fast zombie movie, there's still a good amount of sneaky scenes, and all of those held so much tension, especially because there was outliers in the behaviors of the zombies without getting too spoilery that were scary in their own right. They were nerve-wracking. 10 out of 10.
I'm gonna say the unpredictability was also a 10 out of 10. And now we're gonna do spoilers. So this is the spoiler zone. I found out the reason why I hadn't heard of this movie before. People like happy endings and get mad when they're not happy for humanity. Major spoilers. Please watch this movie. Please don't listen to what happens at the end. Please go watch it first. The main character is this girl, and she is a zombie. She's a zombie girl. So this is like the next generation of zombies. They're like conscious fully. They have better immune systems than humans, all this stuff. And what happens is this girl essentially ends up releasing the virus into the air. It's an L for humanity, basically. And it's time for a new era of a dominant species. And let me tell you, I did not see that shit coming at all. I loved the ending. I'm sure that was the most controversial part of it, and I'm sure that's why it wasn't popular. The antagonist is a lady who knows that she can make a cure, but she has to use the body parts of this main character, so she would have to die. And so she's like, well, why should you be the ones to live? So she goes and sets her own species free, essentially. 10 out of 10. Didn't see that coming. Or anything else, really.
I read this book several years ago. I watched this movie several years ago. I was still surprised when everything was happening. There's not a whole lot to add on to what you said, but I loved it. I thought it was so interesting. I'm sad that more people haven't appreciated it for what it was. 10 out of 10. Exit spoiler zone. Sure.
Welcome back, spoiler-free people.
Please watch this movie.
Watch this movie,
it's
dude.
So good.
All of Us Are Dead.
So All of Us Are Dead is a K-drama series that came out last year, I believe? Perhaps 2020? I don't remember. We just recently watched it, so it doesn't actually matter. It's based on a manhwa of the same name. I know the ending is completely different. I haven't read the manhwa, to be entirely honest. I heard this ending is better, but this is up to interpretation. I'm not gonna step on those toes. Those toes, unstepped. I really, really enjoyed this drama. I thought it was fun. Was it realistic? Absolutely not. But if you go into a Korean drama expecting realism, that's on you. Be ready to be just entertained.
I was entertained. I had a fun time. I think it's a fun show. Let's talk about the character depth.
There was none.
The main characters had a little something going on. There were some moments that made me tear up a little bit, you know. That's how good those moments were for these main characters. It's an ensemble cast with not much of a reason for there to be. You don't need all these kids here for a good story, man. And they also do a whole lot of that post-apocalypse bickering thing that I really don't like. I really don't like. They do it a lot. They just fight a lot about everything. And it's like, I get it. It makes, they're kids, but like that doesn't make it fun to watch. I'm coming down on it at the beginning of the review. I want to make it clear I like this show. I just didn't like that part of it.
I enjoyed the ensemble cast. I always think it's really interesting when there's a large group of people. I don't even know how many main characters there really were, but there wasn't any development outside of like maybe 4 characters. And we're talking there's like 10,
20?
12.
I just remember there's also a whole B plot with the detective guy.
That's true.
Okay, the B plot guy, solid character work there, actually. I love that guy. I think he has more depth than anyone else in the whole show. That might just be because he's an adult.
The adult characters, very solid character development of all of them. But as far as the A plot with the kids, there's like 4 characters that get development. Everyone else, very much just there. Personally, I love pieces of media where you are reminded that your cast is still just kids and they're just at a very young age just trying to figure stuff out already, and now they're thrown into a situation that no one should have to live through, let alone actual children. And there's a lot of that, but it can also just be seen as pointless bickering. One thing I really just did not vibe with is there's a lot of fat jokes. There's so many fat jokes. There's a character that's just a little heavier than the rest of the cast, and he is the butt of almost every single joke that they have in store.
And he's such a sweet character too.
Really is.
He doesn't do anything bad to anyone.
It was weird in the first joke and then just got tiring because it kept going. Always a fat joke.
Hey, you're big.
And that's it. That's the joke every single time.
I gave the character depth a 5.5 out of 10.
I put 5 out of 10 for character development. For zombie lore, without getting too into spoilers, we do follow the creator of the infection for a little while. So we do get a good amount of insight for why this infection came to be. There's not a whole lot we have on certain mutations for the infection that we find later on in the drama, but for the base infection we have a good amount of information for, and it's very fun, it's very interesting. The motivations behind the infection are very interesting, which I believe is kind of outside the zombie lore. More just character analysis, still very fun.
Yeah, the mutations you mentioned, without getting into spoilers, those were the parts that went unexplained, but they were such a fun and interesting development in the story that I think it was okay that we didn't get the exact lore. I do hope that they dive into that at some point, but if this season was standalone, I would have been okay with it as it is because it's such an interesting addition to it, and I feel like explaining it further, I don't think there was a natural way for them to do that with the story that they had. Yeah, really fun zombies. It's another fast zombie movie, fast turn times. Most of it takes place in a high school, so that's freaking scary, but
hate high school.
Zombie Lore was an 8.5 out of 10 for me. So the pacing for me is the thing that's holding me back from loving this show to death. It takes its time in a lot of places that I really wish it didn't. Again, it's got an ensemble cast, which can be really fun. And there are moments in this show where I do enjoy that there's so many people there to react to things differently. Most of the time it leads to them fighting about things that I don't want to hear about. Any side plots where the main group wasn't there were interesting for the most part, although a lot of times they also just kind of led to a dead end, and then you were like, okay, why did we just watch all that then? It's got plenty of action, it's just also got plenty of talky talk. Talky talk I don't care for. It was a 5 out of 10 for me for the pacing.
Personally, for me, I love the talkie talk. A majority of the dialogue was very foreshadowy, so I had a lot of fun guessing who was going to die next, and I was never wrong. So it made me sad, but I was right, and I love being right. The fight scenes were very, very fast-paced. I really, really enjoyed the fight scenes.
They're really fun.
Or the action scenes in general. Very innovative, very fun, very unrealistic, but again, you're watching a K-drama, so don't be a dweeb. If there was any pacing issues for me, they were completely stomped by how much fun I had with watching a bunch of high schoolers fight some zombies.
Yeah, that never got old, actually.
7 out of 10.
You are now entering the spoiler zone.
Oh my god.
Okay, we're gonna talk about the antagonist now. You don't know who that is yet if you haven't watched the show, so get out of here. Skip ahead, you dweeb.
Go watch that show, baby.
Yeah, so the antagonist is this bully guy that becomes a zombie, but he's a smart zombie. This is probably the scariest antagonist on this list of films and shows. I know you found it annoying that it kept like seeming like he was dead and he kept coming back. Me personally, I was happy every time because it meant I got to see more of this creepy, scary dude. He was just so much fun to watch. And he has a little bit of character depth. It's nothing too crazy, but it's like, you get it. He's mad at the world and he's a zombie and he's unkillable now in his eyes, so he's gonna do what he can with that to like exact revenge and just put other people in misery. 8.5 out of 10.
There was actually 2 antagonists in this K-drama.
I forgot about the other one.
There was the dude that Danny just talked about, and there was also a girl. I think she was more of a B-plot. I found her to be absolutely tragic. She made me sad. She wasn't particularly scary. She definitely got scarier, I think. But I could not help but feel bad for her. I think she was probably the saddest character in the entire drama.
Yeah.
Made me very upset. The main villain, though, was super cool. Very annoying that they kept saying that he was dead and then he kept coming back. I'm cool with like a character getting hurt and then coming back, but every time he left, you were like, oh, he's for sure dead.
And
then
he falls out of a building.
Never was. He fell off so much stuff.
There's a point where he like falls off of the roof because he kept falling out of the building.
He falls off of the full entire building.
Yeah, and I was so happy because I was like, babe, he fell off the building. That means he's definitely gonna come back. And I was right.
Like, what's it gonna take?
An explosion.
That's debatable, honestly.
He never came back after that, right?
Because the season ended.
Neither did the living character that was in that explosion, so...
We don't know. They were in the teasers for the next season.
What?
It was confirmed.
Okay, well this is... Okay, maybe you have a point then.
Well, at least the main character. I don't know about the villain.
Probably flashback. Let it be flashbacks.
Who's to say?
Tension was also pretty high. Even bits where they're bickering and stuff. You never know when they're gonna be so loud that a bunch of zombies start breaking the window, you know? Pretty frightening show. They're fast zombies, they're scary zombies.
For me, a lot of the tension in the show was another one of the side plots. There is a father trying to get to his daughter who is in the high school. She's part of the main cast in the A plot. We watched one of the characters' moms die pretty early on in the show with seemingly no plot attachment. So I was very nervous for more parents to die, especially with how big his quest was. To watch him die would be absolutely tragic. And this show loves tragedy more than anything. Does he live? I don't know. Watch the show.
Watch the show.
I don't care this is a spoiler section. Watch the show.
The fact that some characters can turn into smart zombies adds this like level of tragedy every time a character gets bit, because every time you're like, well, maybe they'll turn into a smart zombie, maybe they'll be okay. It's this tiny flicker of hope because it really is a rare occurrence and we don't fully understand why. So every time it's like, oh no, and then they just die and turn into a normal zombie usually. So I just thought I'd highlight that. Highlight some tragedy in there real quick, and we're out of the spoilers.
Oh,
Welcome
Danny
back,
cried.
spoiler-free people. I did cry.
Spoiler-free zone.
Really, I just teared up.
Extra points for Danny being sad.
There is a scene where a character sees a zombie of someone that they knew before. The way that the characters around that person react to the whole situation did really get to me. As far as drama goes, I think it was the most well-executed scene in the whole show.
Watch the show.
And the final thing we're rating is the unpredictability. It's a super twisty show. There are several moments where you feel like you have a good grip on where it's going and what's gonna happen next, and just the most unexpected turn will happen, and it really keeps you watching, it keeps you invested. 9 out of 10 for unpredictability for the twisty factor alone.
Like I had mentioned before, a lot of characters really foreshadow their deaths. Like, it was just in there. It was very difficult to miss.
Like, it was their job.
It was their job to tell you they were about to die. But there were some characters that died and it was so fast, like you just were not expecting it. Terrible, terrifying, hated it. I loved it, but I hated it. They were fun to watch, very upsetting to watch, but that unpredictability really kept me invested in the show. 7.5 out of 10 for unpredictability.
Wow, babe. Really, for sure, definitely all of us are dead. But what about The Last of Us?
That was so bad. The Last of Us is an HBO series that just recently ended. It's based off of a 2012 video game under the same title, created by Naughty Dog. It is one of, if not my favorite video game of all time. And I was very, very excited for this series. There was a lot of people that were just not down for it, considering all of the major world building changes that were made, but I adored it. I think they did such a good job. If you haven't already watched it, I could not recommend it enough. If you haven't played the game either and you're interested and on the fence about playing the game, please play the game. The game is so good on its own as well. But if you're just interested in watching the show, it is a perfect standalone piece of media. Just consume it any way you can.
I haven't played the game and I love the show. Essentially, I know how each game, because there's 2 games, I know how each one begins and ends. And this show is so well executed that even the little bits I knew were gonna happen really got me. Made me cry just because of the
extra
acting.
points for Danny crying.
So many points for me crying. I cried
so much.
Almost every episode. Not every episode, but almost. It's a really emotional show. It loves to make you love something and then take it away in 60 minutes, you know?
That's the overarching theme, baby.
Okay, let's
Character
talk about
death.
character death.
I love a good found family. Can't miss with it. It's always perfect. And this is no exception. It's perfect. I loved the way these characters were written. I think that their motivations are even clearer than they were in the video game. I think Neil has really grown in his ability to write characters and write their motivations. And it is just very clear what these characters are going for. It's very clear what their end goal is going to be. And it makes it all the more tragic by the end of the series. Is that a spoiler?
Pretty tragic show.
It's an all-around tragic show. Still very well done. I give it a full 10 out of 10.
So we got Joel and Ellie, and Joel is another one of those characters who, even though you may not agree with every decision he makes, you certainly understand it. And it's really easy to empathize with him, even when he's doing something that is objectively terrible. And as interesting as I find Joel to be, I actually really like Ellie quite a bit more. She has more depth than I was expecting. In these kinds of shows, it's really easy to just keep a character who's badass that way the whole time with no explanation for why, but you don't get that with Ellie. With Ellie, you get to understand how she became the person that she is, and it makes you respect her more the more that you learn about her past, how she's able to be so strong in the face of such a terrible, terrible world that she's living in. There are scenes and moments where she kind of breaks down into a more vulnerable version of herself. It's very subtle. It's not just she out of nowhere starts opening up about stuff like a lot of shows will do to further a badass character, you know? It pleasantly surprised me. I liked the characters. I will give them an 8 out of 10. The zombie lore was fun. I know a lot of changes were made from the game to the show, and in my opinion, I mean, I'm biased because I haven't played the game, but I think they were all for the better. The opening scene tells you exactly how such a virus like this could happen. There's a couple more flashback scenes just at the very beginning of a few episodes that give you more depth into the very beginnings of this virus and help you to understand how mankind fell into such a hopeless state so quickly. The zombies themselves are super scary and interesting. They aren't on camera as much as I understand a lot of people would have liked them to be. I felt like it was a story that was a lot more about the characters than the zombies. A lot of zombie shows and movies are, but I feel like this one really leaned into that. It's more about the fact that the world has fallen rather than the zombies being an active threat. But when they're there, they are very much so a threat and a very scary one. And I think the mix of practical effects and CGI was also... My camera died. I give the zombies a 9 out of 10. I liked them.
As a game player, I actually fully welcomed the changes that were made in the show. I know that a lot of people...
Sorry.
I know that a lot of people were not particularly interested in any major changes being made to the world from the game to the show, but I completely understand why they changed it. When you switch mediums like that, it's really important to take into account what will look good on camera, and having characters wear masks as often as they did in the video game just wouldn't look as cool.
Stunt the acting.
Yeah, it's stunt the acting. Pedro Pascal's already in the show where he wears the mask all the time. Let him show his face. With the zombies as a concept, I love them. They're so cool. I love anything that grows mushrooms. programs out of themselves. I love a good, you know, stage progression. Not a whole lot to say that hasn't already been said about them. They're overall just very, very cool. Very fun to look at, very scary to deal with, I'd imagine. A solid 9 out of 10. With the pacing, overall, it was a relatively slow-paced show, but it was never a hindrance to its ability to tell its story. I do admire how much care they took in pausing on stories that really honed in their overall message, which is like just how much love affects people, especially in an apocalyptic scenario. I know that a lot of the episodes where they did stall on those and didn't focus on the main storyline were particularly not liked, but I think it was for other reasons outside of the pacing.
You know what you are.
We know what you are. It's a solid 9 out of 10 for me.
Something I wanted to do was compare The Walking Dead to this show, because The Walking Dead has flashback episodes or episodes where they'll intercut with a main action with a flashback, and it's almost always a hindrance rather than a blessing, you know? Because it's so annoying. They so often will like put the main story on pause to give you a less interesting story that may add character depth in the long run, but in the moment it's just frustrating because it's so much less interesting than what's going on now. In this show, it took great care in knowing when to give you this information in a way that it would be interesting. There was never a moment where I was like, oh my god, get on with it. I need to see what's going on right now. It essentially gave you an entire another short film to watch that was set in the same universe that also truly impacted once you got back how you saw things. Overall, I did think there were some moments that were a bit too slow for my liking, but it didn't happen too much. It is a slow-paced show, and I don't think it really hurt it in the long run, so I give the pacing an 8 out of 10, me personally. I adore those flashback episodes. There's two where it's like the majority of the episode is a flashback. They're both beautiful and both made me cry. So the antagonists for me were a weaker point in the show. I don't think any of them were bad. Like, they all served their purpose for what they were meant to do in the story. I don't think any of them had so much depth that I cared about them. They're on an adventure, they aren't sticking around in these places, so we don't see these antagonists for long, or I'm getting as much depth to them as I feel like you could. But they all served their purpose. What kind of traumatic emotional damage are they going to inflict upon our main characters before they dip, you know? And I think one of them also served a heavy foreshadowing purpose, but whatever. The only antagonists I really did care for were the finale antagonists. I'm not gonna say anything else about that. Okay, your turn.
Number.
Oh, number. I give the antagonist a 6.5 out of 10.
I really enjoyed the antagonists. I thought the show-only antagonist that they added was very interesting.
Hey, surprise! Spoilers! Skip ahead for no spoilers.
I didn't mind Kathleen. I thought she was really cool. David has IRL scared me. I am for real scared of his actor now. Bella Ramsey did too good of a job acting. I am haunted by episode 8. Super scary. Absolutely loved it. A solid 8 out of 10. Spoiler zone end.
Spoiler zone end. It was very brief, just to talk about one thing. The tension was high the whole time, and I give it a 9 out of 10. I don't have much to say. I don't know. It was scary.
I mean, I played the games and I still was scared. Even when things were happening that I knew were going to happen, I was still terrified to watch them, especially with how well shot and well acted this show was. Everything was scary, even when you know what's going to happen. Also a solid 9 out of 10.
When side characters are introduced and you like them, you're like, oh god, I hope they make it to the end of the episode.
Unpredictability.
Like I said before, I knew how it would start, I knew how it would end. I couldn't have imagined how this all would have played out. I didn't know it would impact me as much as it did. I'll give unpredictability an 8 out of 10 because every episode was a new story, basically.
Nothing was particularly unpredictable to me, just because I did play the games. A lot of the middle of arcs would change. The beginning and end would always stay the same, or at least the end result would stay the same. I was still ready for all of those changes that were going to be brought to the show, and they all made me pleasantly surprised. I was always very, very happy with them. I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Watch The Last of Us.
Watch The Last of Us.
Play
The Last of Us.
Keep making video game movies and shows, because y'all did Arcane and y'all did The Last of Us. I know y'all did some other ones, but those are the ones I really liked, so keep doing those. Y'all are doing a good job.
Watch the first Sonic movie.
So yeah, in conclusion, did anything replace The Walking Dead for me in my heart and in my soul? No. But I watched a lot of really cool stuff. The Walking Dead is such a special place for me, but there really are as many 1 out of 10s as there are 10 out of 10s in that show. So it was nice to find some movies like The Girl with All the Gifts where it's mostly 10 out of 10s. If you want to watch us talk about more zombie media, because we also watched a bunch of funny zombie movies that didn't fit the criteria of how we were rating things at all, we'd be happy to make a video about that. Let us know in the comments below. If you hated Mac, be sure to hit dislike.
No, do it.
Bye!
Bye!
You have anything you want to plug? You want to plug your Instagram?
Absolutely not. Don't contact me.
I'll just put your phone number on the screen. I'll scroll by like an infomercial.
I don't exist for any reason.
Mac was never real.
I wasn't. I'm CGI'd in, actually.
No.
This was a project that Danny had to do for the government.